I believe Rob used to say, if I'm not mistaken.
Many marbles here.
The many marbles indeed, as the two Method teams square up. All power is restored here. Power to the teams, both rushing down the left stairwell, getting ready for a pretty substantial pull, likely looking to get ready with their first Reaping Wave, maybe even onto the boss, Nagura.
Yeah, we actually see the pull of Method A having some of those pups in this trash pull, which we haven't seen from other teams so far. Other teams used to just see the pups because they have so much less HP than all the other trash. So we saw some saps, some prisons coming out, some blinds coming out, just to not have these pups in the trash group. Well, Method A is just kind of pulling it on top of it, trying to not bolster those mobs too early.
Bit fortunate there for Method A as Nerf Clap dodged one of the cheap shots that actually ended up going up on Yoda, who did get down to 10% health, but better than having your tank get cheap shot with all those mobs on top of you and stun for a few seconds. But Yoda once again dipping low and proccing that cheat death. JB immediately shifting attention over to him as the Quaking is about to come out. Shakib quite low as well, dipping to 25%. JB struggling to keep everybody healthy as Method EU finishing up their Bloodlust as well. So a bit stingy but tactical here for Method A as they actually held on to their Bloodlust.
Yeah, so Method EU, those last two mobs that are left, they are so bolstered. You can see this Dust Devil and the Stonefish is so high in HP and high in size because of those 4 or 5 bolstering stacks that they have. Now they did manage to finish those mobs off, but we saw now just trying to kite here, because if you do get hit by one of those mobs with a couple of stacks, it's definitely trouble. Now they're going back and clearing those pups he just packed before that they skipped earlier, while Method A actually chose to engage the boss fight here.
Engage the boss fight and at a higher percentage on what seemed a better managed pull and a certainly less dangerous one. Adder is now down to 50% for Method A, who still has access to their Bloodlust, probably saving it from either thinking the first Reaping Wave or some kind of large trash combination in Marekta, the second boss's room. Shakib proccing the cheat death there as well. Nerf Clap down to 1% health as they rush over to Aspects. The Lightning Shield has changed bosses, so quite dangerous there. They do have the Battle Res active. Certainly don't want to be using it this early into the dungeon. Method EU predictably proccing their first Reaping Wave as they grab it over into the first boss.
That almost spelled disaster here for Method A as their tank almost went down. But this boss fight here, there's a bunch of pretty dangerous abilities that come out that can definitely kill you, even in a fortified setting, especially the Lightning Shield, which jumps from one boss to the other from time to time. If you do attack the boss with the Lightning Shield on him, then you will get reflected damage on you that can definitely kill you if you hit it at the wrong time, or you get hit by another ability on top of it. As we see, Aspects right now constantly casting those Jolt casts, which are lightning bolts targeting random players that need to be interrupted, because if they don't, then you can definitely die on top of some other abilities.
And speaking of burst damage, Nagura, Fragments right there proccing that cheat death with just a ton of damage coming in with that static shock as they swap over to Aspects. Finally, Adderus dies for Method A, who does a similar pull that we saw in the previous series with 40k. Some of the trash on the side on top of Aspects in order to, well, first kill Aspects before he gets bolstered, and then proc that first Reaping Wave, which they will likely combine with one more trash pack prior to going to the Gauntlet with the one rider on it.
Yeah, so Method EU, of course, already on 23%, so they already dealt with their Reaping Wave. They only have to deal with the boss here. I'm not sure if Method EU will also choose to pull this trash pack, because we've seen a lot of teams doing it, and it seems pretty efficient as long as you kill the boss before you kill any of the other trash, making sure to not bolster it. Well, but Method EU does have quite a bit more percentage than Method A, so they might just kill the boss, make sure they deal with it properly, and then skip to the next trash.
Bit of mismanagement for Bolstering there on that large Stonebreaker, but nonetheless, Method A do chew through it and run right over to the same pack. So similar pull pattern, like I said, that we saw in the previous series in the lower finals, as Method A runs up. Actually, they run straight through. They avoid completely the first Reaping pack, rush down as quickly as possible, straight into Shadow Meld, and then straight into the Rogue Shroud, skipping everything, getting the sap up, true CC, and moving past towards the bridge leading to Marekta's second room, as Method EU spreading out here for another Quaking whilst they finish Aspects at 10%.
Yeah, so Method A using their Shrouds here as they come out of the Shroud, they pull this Rider. Now some of the Reaping Souls, they didn't manage to de-aggro with their Shadow Maul, so they will have to kill those too, but it shouldn't be a problem as there's only a couple of them left. Now those Riders are a little bit dangerous, not only because they do a lot of tank damage and they have a frontal breath that is pretty deadly if you get hit by it as a non-tank, but also because they just have much more HP than the rest of the trash mobs around here. So you need, because of the bolstering, you don't really want to pull them on top of anything else, because they just need so much focus damage.
Yeah, certainly lieutenant-style mobs in those Grolusk Riders, as you see them get them just low enough at about 50 to 60% health, after which they move down into the tender area with the incubators. But Mirror's having a bit of a death here for Method EU, as we need to spend the time now from Zalia to res him. Fortunately, that came between two Quaking pulses, so they don't need to waste any more time than needed. Heading down Method EU now into Merektha's room, something that Method NA is already well working on, with a fair bit of mobs here that they have to babysit properly for that Bolstering. Tree of Life already out for JB.
Yeah, so Tree of Life, a very talent that we see often in Temple. Again, with Bolstering, you can't really do those huge pulls that we see without Bolstering. We see Mirrors die again, actually, for Method EU, so they need to use a Battle Rest this time around. They're out of Battle Rests at this point. They do have 2 deaths, meaning 10 seconds difference here, and they definitely need to shape up their play here, because we saw them struggle in Madelot, and we saw them struggle today in general, so they definitely need to shape up their play. No more Battle Rests left, and this is the last game, so this is about winning this tournament.
I mean, they're merely falling behind here. Method NA still has not used their Bloodlust, but pulls the entirety of the room, and finally we see their first Bloodlust go off. Now, this is a really dangerous pull, just in general. Of course, a lot of the damage going out, as with Fortified, you have the poisons going out on various members, only limited access to dispels, but really it was going to be about the Bolstering management at the end of this. The final few mobs are going to have a ton of extra damage from these stacks, and if they mismanage it, a ton of health too. That Nerf Clap is just going to be kiting around in circles on a boss level mob, but Yoda goes down, not having access to that cheat death earlier. Battle Res immediately comes up, so Method NA not having access to that either, but they handle it quite well, as the final tender gets stunned and goes down before causing any more despair to Nerf Clap. Here comes the 40% Reaping Wave just as Merektha spawns.
Such a shame. You had only had a couple of seconds left on this cheat debuff as it ran away right now. So if you would have died a little bit later, his cheat death would have been back up. But nevertheless, they did have a battle rest ready, so they managed to recover, got him back up as they're engaging the boss here. Now this boss, not very dangerous on a fortified setting. The only thing you have to be careful about is the control of the breath, because it will target a random player back towards it and leave those green pools behind. That can be annoying later on in the fight, especially in the intermission phases, as we see it happen right now.
Big pull coming in here from Method EU to follow suit on Method NA. In it, of course, is the second Reaping Wave. Now, moving a fair bit slower here in terms of pull pattern. This is, I suppose, what Method NA saved their first Bloodlust for, so well strategized by them and really efficient as well, as we've already answered this first transition phase, as Nagura mentioned. Not too dangerous with these venomous Ophidians, but the second transition is really where you can make up or actually lose a lot of time, just because of the sand-encrusted snakes that come out. Want to make sure you're constantly moving out of those clouds or crowd controlling, AoE stunning them before they get that cloud cast. Once again, as we've seen with other teams in this dungeon, Method NA opts to pull the Nimbus through the wall, making sure that they kill it whilst the second transition is happening, else you will actually bolster the boss, and you certainly don't want that.
Yeah, so Method EU dealing with the last trash here. They did bolster some of those mobs quite a bit, so losing a lot of time here because of this extra HP that they do gain from the bolstering, but now they managed to engage the boss fight as well. They, of course, do have their Bloodlust up earlier than Method NA because they used it on their very first trash pull at the start, but still, only 2% trash ahead on Method EU side, while engaging the boss fight so much later. Method NA definitely in the front seat right here, as they do have the Nimbus to kill here before the boss comes back up, as you mentioned, because if they don't, then they will bolster the boss, and that will definitely be a disaster.
And certainly bolstering these sand-encrusted stalkers is not really a big deal, especially when they're such low health. Non-elite mobs, they just flop over as long as they're kept out of those clouds so you can actually hit them. Method EU following suit with that Nimbus pulled as well, wanting to make sure to get it low enough before that 40% transition, something Method NA has already surpassed and is now dealing with their last phase, where the boss gains both types of abilities, has the frontal breath, the venomous breath, but also has the blinding sand. If they spend too long in this phase, she will summon an extra 4 snakes, something you definitely want to avoid, because at that point the fight can actually get kind of nasty.
Yeah, definitely do not want to get hit by this blinding sand, and I don't think we've seen any of those teams have those snakes spawn in the last phase, because this is a fortified setting and most of those teams have enough damage to just skip them. As we also see Method NA kill the boss before the snakes even spawn, and now we're going to see a Shroud come in. Thankfully they did have the Quaking right before they pulled the Shroud, else they would have had to wait for it, because getting the Quaking in the middle of the Shroud can be very dangerous, because not only do you have to dodge the Lightning Gauntlet, but if you hit another player with your own Quaking, you will get broken out of stealth, and it can be dangerous because you can pull full mobs, and you can get anyone out of his stealth as well.
nerfclap getting ready for the 6th dervish pull here as he collects everything together. These dervishes don't move, but they can be displaced with typhoons. Of course, JB is very busy healing in that tree form. Just tons of damage that goes out onto the group. You can see the group just dipping so low. nerfclap not moving too much for the swirlies. That's what I was getting to. These mobs only move by teleporting to their active target and then splashing a bit of lightning damage on that spot. So you don't want to move too much as the tank, as you want to keep them grouped up together for the rest of the melee to cleave, but you certainly don't want to take too much damage. As Yoda dipping quite low, having a bit of struggle here for JB to heal him through it, and he's just run out of that tree form, but there are still some dervishes up. They work to kill 4 of them, I believe. No, there's 3 left in there, so half of them are gone. It should be a bit safer, but nerfclap still in that lower region of percent.
Yeah, definitely a very hard job for JB to heal the group here. As you see JB dropping solo, both of the rogues do have their cheat death back up available to them, so it should be okay for them to deal with the rest of the mobs. But if they kill those mobs, they will proc the reaping. And one thing to note, those dervishes actually do not bolster at all because they're a little bit weird. They interact weird with the affixes because those dervishes actually spawn the boss once they die. As you see, those sparks actually reform in the middle of the room right now, and then they will spawn Galvas, the next boss.
But what will spawn first, of course, is the 3rd reaping wave as they go up and grab some extra trash with, looks like they will. Yes, indeed, they will grab some extra trash just to make it as efficient as possible. Now, we see 2 different strategies with this reaping wave. We'll see what Method EU does with theirs, but they have popped their Bloodlust and committed it to this dervish pull. There is an extra Nimbus in there for them, so they were comfortable enough to pull that very dangerous mob with the release charge on top of all this extra damage from the Nimbuses. From the dervishes rather. Now, a bit dangerous here for Method NA as they have to deal with a double Nimbus. Want to make sure you interrupt all those charges, else they will buff them. The accumulate charge will buff them by 100% damage done, meaning their release charge is going to do a ton of damage. Method EU opting, I believe, to likely pull this reaping into the boss or at least kill it off so that Xaylia can have a drink first.
Yeah, so Method EU catching up quite a bit at this point, but just because of those different pull patterns. Now, pulling this Nimbus on top and having this extra 2% from just having more percentage in the very first room just means they only have to do 1 pull here and then pull a reaping, while Method NA had pulled the dervishes first and then pulled the reaping back on top of this Nimbus and the Stormcallers. So Method EU on 66% trash and engaging Galvas, while Method NA still having to deal with a couple of those mobs in the back and then engaging Galvas themselves.
Yeah, and that was just an unlucky timing for nerfclap right there as a Quaking came in. JB was trying to heal me. He was already quite low from the Nimbus or the Nimbi, and it procced his trinket as a result with that. So they grab the boss, reset it real quick so JB can have a small drink, get the group healed up, and they will get started on the boss. So Method EU certainly starting to get a fair bit ahead there, regardless of the 3% trash difference. Now, Nigger, I'm not sure if that 69% for Method NA is actually enough for them to skip the channeler at the end of the bridge. That could be the make or break for the 2 teams, assuming they get safely through Galvas, who is now at 50% for Method EU.
Yeah, this might actually mean exactly what you said, that they can skip this 1 mob. Now, Method NA is on 70%, Method EU on 66%, dealing with Galvas. Now, that could definitely make or break it, even if Method NA pulling the boss later. This 1 mob, this channeler, just costing you so much time if you have to deal with it by itself, just so inefficient. But let's talk about Galvas a little bit, as it is a very dangerous fight to deal with, very healing-intensive fights. Even in a Fortified setting, if you get bad Quaking timing, something can definitely go wrong, as we see those pillars spawn on the side that casts this lightning thing onto the boss. If it's not intercepted by a player, then it will give the boss energy, and if the boss reaches 100% energy, he will explode and do a substantial amount of AoE damage to the whole group.
And that energy is gained fast. I mean, you screw up for a couple seconds with 1 Spire and it's pretty much over. 9 stacks that you get per Spire into the players, increasing that damage taken. Not to mention the AoE pulsing on the group. Trying as much as they can to not rotate it onto the tank, which would be the obvious target, but it does a fair bit of damage to the boss melees the tank for a fair bit of damage. Method EU has now moved past Galvas, 66%, meaning they will likely need to deal with this channeler, as now kind of just cheats and jumps over the electric gauntlet here, moving down the bridge as quickly as they can to get to the channeler so that he stops sending these balls of lightning. Here comes the spark channeler. They will have to chew through this before moving on to the gauntlet, something that Method NA will have the luxury of skipping with a shroud.
Yeah, so Method NA on 30% onto the boss here, as Method EU dealing with this channel. Now this gauntlet later with the ice, not very difficult to deal with, but we saw teams mess it up. We saw teams lose the orb to one of the orb guardians to cut it back, so you definitely have to be careful to not do anything wrong with that. What you usually see is we have the tanks just kind of pick up all the mobs in the whole room, just making one sweep around, and then we see the rogues just pulling, taking both of the orbs on the left and the right side, and just getting it to the snakehead at the very end of the room. Now, you still gotta be careful because some of those orb guardians are trying to get your orb away from you. They are stealth, so you gotta be careful that you don't pull them on your way.
Method EU's definitely still a bit ahead. They've already dealt with their channeler, that Method, and they will be able to skip. But Method NA still needs to make their way through the gauntlet, down the bridge, stealth past the mob, and then start the gauntlet. So the 5-second difference in favor of Method NA is not enough. They're about probably 15-20 seconds behind Method EU at this point as they do the head-eye combo for the gauntlet perfectly. Method EU goes right by, gets ready with the Shadow Meld, and will mass stealth through the trash down to the Hoodoo Hexer ×4 room before pulling Avatar of Sethraliss, the final boss. Method NA finally gets their Shroud up and is moving past the Channeler, looking to do the same thing, but Nerve Clap unfortunately gets clipped by the lightning on the bridge and dies on his way. An absolute disaster. They will be able to stealth on the far side of the bridge and have JB pop his 100-yard mass res, but what a waste of time here as Method EU's pulling further and further ahead with these Hoodoo Hexers.
Yeah, definitely a disaster coming in by NA here. Now they do have, both of them do have 2 deaths. Now, the 5 seconds difference that we had before Nerve died actually might have helped Method NA to just get a little bit closer, but now they're same deaths. They don't have a time advantage anymore, and I think he's also out of range for the rest. So JB actually had to go all the way back, had to use his battle rest, and now they will have to do the skip again. So disaster for Method NA here. Even if it was just a small mistake, it is just costing them so much. Method EU already on the trash here to spawn the last boss.
Yeah, I mean, this has pretty much cost them the match and any potential to win it or get close to it, unless Method EU has a hiccup here and fails. But we know, Nagura, as soon as we get the Avatar healed up to 100% and that debuff comes on the players, it's all over at that point. It's just a matter of them effectively cleaving everything down. So we'll have to see how they do here. Xaylia certainly can hold his own in terms of pumping out the heals necessary to get the boss from 0 to 70 and then 70 to 100 to proc the 3 phases of the fight.
Yeah, so we see Method EU, of course, still needing 11% trash. Now, this will be done at the very end in the last phase once the buff gets applied. Now, the gist of this fight is that you need to kill those Hoodoo Hexers to be able to heal the boss. Now, the Avatar needs to be healed in order to proc those next phases, and in order for the Avatar to be healed, you need to kill the Hoodoo Hexers, which there's 4 of them in each phase. Now, other than that, the only thing you have to deal with is the Heart Guardian. It does quite a bit of tank damage, and you also have to deal with the Plague Doctors, which do constantly cast abilities that need to be interrupted. That's why we sometimes just see them being hard to see with an Incap or a Bind coming out from a rogue. And
more problems coming in for Method NA as one of their eyes was not successfully filmed from the side, and a Guardian got a hold of it, wasting a ton of time. Once the Guardians take a hold of that eye, nothing will break it from their greedy little hands except killing them. Doesn't matter if you stun them or not, so they needed to chew through that Guardian's large health pool and then finally get everything going as Nerve Clap runs downstairs, I think with an Invis pod, just to make sure he can get safely through everything. Didn't have the Shadow Meld available, likely just because of some of the issues that they had there. Shroud wasn't available either for the players. Method EU now onto the second phase of Avatar Sethraliss. Hoodoo Hexers dying left and right as Method NA looks to scramble and pull these first Hexers, but Nerve Clap getting absolutely smacked in the face by those initial casts.
This crucial mistake coming in by Method NA here. Now, Method EU definitely their games to win here. There's barely anything they can do wrong. They even have 1 battle rest left available to them, so if anyone dies except Xaylia, they can get them back up. So that's the only thing Method NA can hope for here, is that Xaylia dies. Because if Xaylia dies, not only can't they rest him back up, but they can also not heal the Avatar, right? So that's the one thing they can hope for, but they're already on their last Hoodoo Hexer here, and they can then heal the boss to 100%. And once they have the buff available to them in the last phase, then there's not that much that can go wrong anymore.
I mean, absolutely. Xaylia getting ready to pump the rest of the healing up to 100% on Avatar Sethraliss in just a moment here. They will pretty much achieve soft victory, if you will, just because they'll get that buff coming from Avatar. The rest will just be grabbing all of the trash down the hallway and cleaving it down. Method NA doing what they can to scramble and catch up, starting the final encounter here. But here comes Method EU. Avatar has been healed. She buffs the players with the debuff. Mass amounts of damage given and 90% 50% reduced damage taken. Right up the stairs goes Xaylia to grab the rest of the trash and bring it back in to the players that are cleaving everything down.
Yeah, now the only thing you want to be a little bit careful about here is the bolstering still, because you don't want to be inefficient, right? You don't want to be bolstering everything, especially not if they're high HP. So you want to make sure you deal with the bolstering as best as you can, and you also do not want to kill all the Hoodoo Hexers before you kill the 100% trash, because as soon as the boss fight is over, you also lose the buff. So definitely want to make sure that everything dies somewhat evenly. As we can see, Xaylia just working on this last Hoodoo Hexer here to make sure that he's low. Once they reach the 100% trash, they can just finish up the Hoodoo Hexer, and they're going to be the winners of this tournament.
That's right. Hoodoo Hexer is now down to 55% for the last one that Xaylia is just getting his claws sunk into right now. The rest of the trash getting cleaved down effectively by the players. A lot of hard stacks on now the tank, but shouldn't be an issue for them as they finally cleave the rest of it down and head over to the final Hexer to try and close out this match and claim victory for a second West Cup in a row. Method EU have done it, and they've stayed alive. 2 cups for them.
Method EU taking the second weekend cup in a row here.